success, wealth, recognition. Gary Cooper had it all, lost it all, then turned a revolutionary discovery into the success paradox. Here's Gary.
I'm back with Dr. Theresa Larson, the Marine Corps officer turned advocate for well-being and strength across both personal and professional domains. We've been talking about our shared struggles and the steps we both took during our recovery. Now, Theresa, when I was sick and bedridden for a long time, I would dwell on the things I couldn't do anymore. But then I realized I don't have a terminal illness, just bone issues. So I started focusing on what I could still do. I made a point to be grateful that while I couldn't drink alcohol, I could enjoy other foods. While I couldn't run anymore, I could walk my dog on the beach near my home anytime I wanted. This gratitude has brought more activity into my life. Horseback riding, scuba diving, golfing with my sons. What are your thoughts on practicing gratitude, even amid limitations? Does that play a role in your work?
Absolutely. That's a big part of the practice of mindfulness and meditation too, is acknowledging the here and now and what you have versus don't have. And that is a form of wealth, right? I oftentimes think of wealth as money, but it's much more than that. How you move money, sure, but the value of your thoughts, gratitude increases the wealth of your thoughts. And when you can start looking at what you have versus don't have, then, you start enjoying life more. And they realize the thing that can really halt, I actually think gratitude can determine your attitude, which determines your altitude in life. All those things, that's something my dad used to tell me. But the thing that can really take away gratitude is when you spend so much time on social media. I think for those people that are addicted to that, because that is an addiction, it takes away your ability to look at your own life because you're always looking at other people's.
Yeah, and in my book, I talked about how comparison really almost destroyed me. No matter what I would accomplish, there was always somebody bigger, better, stronger, better looking, richer, no matter what I accomplished. And that's such a destructive thing. And this guy told me one of the most transforming things of my life. He said, why don't you compare yourself to yourself? And I'm like, I don't really know, practically, I don't know what that means. And he said, if you just beat Gary every day from yesterday, you're going to surprise the world. And that's what I tell people. I tell my children and I tell people at work. I use it at work. I say, look, who cares if our competitor puts an office right across the street? Just beat you.
Absolutely. And you know what? I heard this thing recently. You'll appreciate this as a businessman. I mean, this is maybe a cliche phrase, but when you really work to 10x your business, your life in general, let's say, exponentially increase the impact you have in life. Not just going for the average, but exponentially. There really aren't any competitors. Like you're so unique to what you do and how you do it. I mean, I have to know who my competitors are when I do, because in government contracting, but ultimately I'm actually working with them to accomplish a mission and vision and or influence people, right? You end up becoming friends with those people who are doing similar stuff because you build each other up. And those companies that don't want to do that, you're like, okay, you got it wrong. Got it all wrong. But I kind of like that. We're in an infinite game. It's like, there's no competitor. There may be someone else doing exactly what I'm doing. I haven't found them yet, and I'm not really looking necessarily. I know there are institutes that do leadership and well-being, but no one is like me or what my team provides. No one, and actually this is something I pride myself in, and I bet you do the same, is no one will forget how I make them feel.
That's one of my favorite sayings. One of my favorite companies is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A says they don't want to look or smell like any other fast food chain, and they do not. And, we haven't talked about we've talked about everything under the sun so far, but we haven't talked about specifically what your company does, your company name.
Yeah.
So your company's name is what?
So my company's name is Movement RX. And what we do is, our vision is giving people the knowledge and tools to live a lifetime of physical and emotional freedom. Now, our BHAG, which I love to share, which I think is like kind of draws people in even more, is by 2030, our goal is to influence over 100,000 leaders in their well-being, which will not only help them retain their people, but live a longer, happier life. We essentially start from the top down. I mean, you could go bottom up, top down. We've done bottom up. We've done one-on-ones, but you'll never make the biggest impact in an organization's got to start with leadership buy-in.
The big enchilada is movement health.
So no, actually, so it started as a physical therapy business, but we pivoted. We actually sold that part of our business. And now we provide movement. So exercise, prescription, planned and unplanned, meditation and mindfulness, sleep, eating, social support. I said mindfulness and meditation already. So there's 5 components, right, to what we provide a leadership team. So, but typically the trainings though under Movement RX that we work with leaders on is called Your Competitive Advantage. So the Your Competitive Advantage trainings involve components of sleep, food, mindset, right? Which obviously, if you think downstream, will help conflict resolution, burnout, systemic things that come from stress, systemic disease that comes from stress. But we have 4 different trainings we provide an organization. And then we have a whole leadership well-being platform full of like on-demand and live classes.
It's really so needed because you know our healthcare system as well as I do. Our healthcare system, there's a couple things wrong with it. And look, I love healthcare. I spent my entire career here. My dad did before me for 30 years. I've been in it for close to 30 years. But we are a sick-based care system.
Reactive, absolutely.
We wait until we're sick. And the way we're paid is you come in sick and we give you something to get better. And for a workforce, which is what I'm hearing you're saying you do, you come in and make a workforce weller. Is that a word?
Well, yeah. Well, we'll make it that. Yes. We make them. So, and I, what I like, well-being, wellness gets tossed around a lot. It's $1 billion business, right? But the leadership well-being. So we are very much a black sheep in the leadership space too, because we're the softer skills of leadership. And yet we're typically the only ones, we go to conferences and speak, I'm typically the only one speaking about leadership well-being. Yet it's one of the most popular talks. So there is something to it, but I call it your competitive advantage because as an athlete and a Marine, it's like, oh yeah, how can I improve my performance and competitive advantage? I'm still into that, right? Like I want to improve my performance. The reason I meditate every day is because I want to be freaking smart between the ears and I want to respond versus react. I don't want things that will slow me down, get in my way. But I also want to be a better mother, right? More in tune with my husband. Like, so there is the injury prevention part of it, but performance enhancement, I know leaders like that, like myself.
It is paradoxical. Here's a paradox in my life, and I would say for your leadership people, I was told if you want to be productive, you have to rest. And I was like, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever heard. That is so stupid. And the preacher that was telling me this looked at me. I was sitting there wearing a pair of pajama pants and a t-shirt, and I could barely walk. And he was like, well, what do you do, Gary? I'm like, dude, I grind, I pull all-nighters, I do whatever it takes. And I'm sitting there flat-ass busted. I could barely move. And he said, how's that working out for you? Like, not so good. So then I started resting. I started being quiet at meetings. And about 1.5 years later, I realized that I was twice as productive. I was also saying no to things that weren't important because I had a fresh mind. And so those leadership meetings, a lot of people think I'm not going to waste my time with this thing that this thing that Teresa's doing. But when they go to them, they will get laser focused as opposed to going to meet that extra meeting or go to meet that one person for that extra drink to figure out how to get another deal done.
Exactly. So that you get a good point. So in one of my last presentations, I try not to throw like a ton of scientific data at people, but I'd still like to provide some data for the analytical minds of the audience. But there was an individual who asked about productivity within an organization, how like these well-being things relate to productivity. And so I brought up the concept of like monotasking versus multitasking and how that can save you time, right? Versus because multitasking can create a lot of problems and mistakes and isn't efficient. But the thing is, when you think about it, when you take the time to meditate or be quiet or time for yourself, that reaps huge dividends in your life, in your day, right? So when you take that time, you're going to react less and respond better. You'll say no more. So you'll find yourself actually having more time. You'll be more focused and find more flow opportunities from taking the time to meditate, taking time for yourself and quiet. Whatever, even if it's prayer, like I tell people, I meditate and pray, right? That's, I don't really tie religion to my meditation, but I think that just that ability to take the time will give you more time in the end and make you more productive.
Yeah, this big, gentle African-American man, his name was, we call him Big E. He said, I didn't know how to meditate. And I thought you had to have like incense and, Indian music and a bong or something, And he said, boy, don't overcomplicate this thing, boy. He said, praying is talking to God and meditating is listening to God.
I love that. Yeah.
And that just made it real simple for me.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah. Praying's talking to God and meditating is listening to God. He said, don't overcomplicate this thing, boy. Speaking of like Big E and people like him, you talk a lot about the importance of support systems. It says for years people were told to shut up and deal with it. What role does support systems play in your life?
So support is crucial for resilience, first of all. Like you going through, so for example, family, friends, people I hang out with, when I go through a hard time, right, those are the people that are going to have my back and be there for me. And if they're toxic people, they won't, right? So it will impact my journey mentally and physically. Toxic people create more tension in our body, right? They expose us to behaviors that aren't good for us. And we need people. People need people. And so I think it's really important to understand, like, it like, show me the people you hang out with and I'll show you your character. So look at the people you are around and start to weed some of the people out that aren't serving you or building you up, or good friends, true friends, right? True friends listen to those people, those things you don't say, and bring people close that love you and value you. But it is okay to let go because those people impact you.
So like me and you say that today, like for me, getting rid of somebody who I loved, but were difficult for me to say, dude, I just can't have you in my life anymore. That's easy for me and you to say today. But 7 years ago, I can't do that. That's impossible. You can't, well, he is my whatever, family related, whatever, best friend since we were tiny. I can't say no to him. And they were like, yeah, you can. So how did you overcome that fear? Because there's people that might listen to this to say, I can't let them go.
Well, yeah. So it is easy for me to say now, but looking back, like that is part of the journey, of growth journey. It is uncomfortable and it is a hard hit you will take. But in the end, that choosing that hard is going to be way easier for you in the end than choosing the hard of sticking with someone who's toxic, who just continues to infect your life. I've had to let many people go. Some of them have been quietly, like lovingly letting go. Like I just don't respond as much, right? I don't ever cut people out, but I don't also engage all the time. I do it when I have boundaries up. Like boundaries are really important. I respond when it works for me, if it even works for me, right? Like I'm committed to myself to not just be on all the time for anyone. Like I'm here for my family 24/7. But everyone else, they got boundaries, right? We got boundaries with them. I had actually it was a business partner years ago who I chose to go into business with it was more of an emotional driven decision, lessons learned. He was also a good friend, right? I liked him as a coach. I was working, one of my practices was in his gym. But there was a day when he sat down and he said to my husband and I, we worked together, he's like, your job is to make me famous. And I don't know why you don't follow me on Instagram more. And here in my head, I'm thinking, okay, like my Instagram, like fame, like this isn't, how did I choose? I just like started to cry because I was like, how did I choose to work with this kind of individual? Like, how did I not see it? Right? Like, it was like one of those light bulb moments. Like, I am working with a prima donna. I made friends with a prima donna. Now, I know his heart is good, yet we don't align at all with our values. And I actually felt it, right? Working with this guy, I felt it growing, but I didn't listen. And most of you out there know who those people are in your life. You just feel the tension. You don't want to answer the phone. You get tired. But I kept going because I was like, no, this guy, like, he's got great energy, great with people. But when he sat down and I had that like epiphany of, okay, how I got rid of this friend and colleague was buy him out. And thankfully I had the money to do it. But even with that, right, it was very tactful and kind, but I knew that relationship was done. And I couldn't waste any more time and energy with that individual. And had I, we would be nowhere where we are now. Nowhere where we are now.
So that's a great example. Old Gary used to repress those feelings, not say anything, and have stomach aches and drink and to keep it down. And it was terrible mentally and physically for my health. And then new Gary had to learn, basically had to grow up. And this guy told me this one saying, I love the saying. He said, learn to say what you mean without saying it mean. And so now I don't have the regrets. Because what I used to do was not tell you how I felt, and then I would leave, or I would say everything's fine. The two scariest words from my wife are, I'm fine.
Yep. It's like the new F word.
When I hear that, I run for the hills. But, I would say I'm fine, knowing that I wasn't. And then I would, be passive aggressive or whatever. Now I would just say, hey, Theresa, actually, when you said that the other day, it really bothers me. And here's why it bothers me. I know you might not have meant it to sound that way, but this is how I heard it.
Yep, exactly. And that is a really powerful skill. You actually said something, so Brene Brown speaks about this a lot. It's like the story I'm telling myself is this. This is how I heard it. I feel this way, like using I statements. The story I make it mean, that really helps. I actually, with my company now, I work with mindfulness and meditation coaches, even the sleep researcher on our team, she's very grounded in meditation. It actually helps because I will tell the guys, my team, like, I need a mental health day. I don't have to explain why. And or if there's like some miscommunication, we'll send some messages back and forth to each other like, hey, what I meant, this may come across as this, but what I meant was this. So don't take offense. Like, this is just, I needed to get this off my chest. This is the story I'm making it mean. Like, we're very clear with each other now. And there's some, there's always some weird lines that can get crossed, but we're still going to face it versus like let it fester, which is the way it wasn't for old Dr. T.
You're right. I call it growing up, but you talked a lot about when you were younger, you had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect. And I think that leads to a lot of disorders. I know I always felt like I had to be perfect. And I felt like I had to be self-sufficient. Now you're talking about abandoning perfect.
Oh,
What do you mean by that?
Well, abandoning perfect is, there's no such thing as perfect, first of all. But because when you strive to be perfect, like you're not really accepting yourself for who you are. Perfect is actually like, it's a attainment of something that's just impossible to get, and nor would you want it. Like the beauty of life comes in the imperfections, right? The imperfections of who we are, the randomness, the idiosyncrasies, are what make us who we are. The vulnerabilities, the struggles, the ups and downs, that's being human. And when people strive for that, they're missing out on life. Because I've been there. Like that's the thing, like you miss out on life. And that's part of my disorder was I wanted to be perfect and seen as this perfect Marine and be the best. And it cost me my mental and physical health, but you're never going to achieve it. And you're never going to be happy.
I agree with you. I learned this term from another place. They call it progress, not perfection. And I think I have this ideal that like maybe I watch too much TV and movies, but you only see like the beautiful parts of islands when you watch movies. You don't see the slums and the airports and all that stuff. And then when you finally get to those islands and you see, damn, this isn't as pretty as it shows on TV or the brochure. And no, because it's life. And when I would achieve enormous success relative to where I'm from, I would be like, what's next? And putting spirituality, I call it God, in my life, they're like, don't get the credit for all the good and don't get all the credit for all the bad either. Enjoy the ride. And we were a big Disney family. We only live about 7 hours away in South Carolina from Disney. And I promise you, we had as much fun driving to Disney as we did actually in Disney. And so now I think of it like that. Like the journey is just as much fun as actually getting to Disney. So working on building your company, raising those two boys, as wild as they may be, that's a season in our life. And so my kids are almost out of the house. 3 of them are. So that was a season, and that season comes to an end. Same thing for shitty seasons. Those seasons, if we endure them, we're going to learn something from them, as bad as they are. And that season of my life that I was trying to run from and hide from and outdrink, turned out to be a big blessing. And I didn't know it at the time. Your season, turns out you're blessing a lot of people from that really crappy season, and that colonel was such a jerk to you.
Absolutely. And even if I think about it, if I saw any of those guys again, because I'm very active on LinkedIn, or, the veteran community is small, probably just give him a hug.
So what's next for Dr. T?
Well, what's next? Immediately today, I've got a lot of mountain sports going on with my boys today, but for me, with my work I do, which is really my vocation, is focusing on growing my leadership trainings and really doing that from stages. So I speak at conferences, I speak to organizations in their offsites, I speak to executive teams, and I love it. I bring in my team as needed, but we do some government contracting too, which is another way to serve differently, a bit different sales process. But I always like to share this with fellow business owners, entrepreneurs, like we build our business around our life, not life around our business, because I want my business, my family life to be first, our quality of life, how we want to live. And so the business is formed around that. Like, it fits into our life and the way we want to serve and show up for people as well as our family. And I a lot of times I keep my boys in mind when I do this work, because I'm like, I want to create a future for them of safety, performance, but also like show them that there are really good companies out there who will care about them.
Well, the world is better off because of you, because I know from my own experience what your degree could generate in other ways. And doctor of physical therapy could be a very, very large business in the way that traditional healthcare works. And so your why is going to do much more than just business. And people are blessed to have you speak to them. And I'm blessed to have you speak here today. And thank you so much for joining the Success Paradox podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Gary. Well, for your audience, what I'm going to do also is I have a little lifestyle RX where people can download it. It's free. It's just a nice way to look at your life and say, okay, how can I get my life better with these well-being behaviors? And so it's a nice little gift that I'd like to give you all. And thank you very much for being so vulnerable. This is one of my favorite podcasts so far.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day, and be careful on the mountain.
Oh, yeah, careful. It's relative.
And that's it for another episode. If you like the show, please take a moment to subscribe so you'll get notified when my new episodes drop. Also, if you have a moment, I'd love it if you left us a review so that other incredible individuals like yourself can learn about the show. I'll see you next time.
To learn and practice the Success Paradox lifestyle, visit GaryCCooper.com. The Success Paradox is a production of Forbes Books.